Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Sports Talk with Brodes. I'm a little disappointed in myself because this morning, Sunday morning, I put out a tweet on Twitter and I put it on my YouTube community page as well that I was going to do an Ask Me Anything podcast. So people started dropping all sorts of comments, asking me questions, calling into the Anytime hotline and asking all of these fantastic questions. And then out of nowhere, there's a big bomb dropped on us from ESPN. It was Chris Mortensen and Tim McManus together dropping this bombshell of an article about Doug Pederson. So I feel awful. I feel bad. I feel like a shit human being because I want to answer everything that was delivered my way. I packaged them all up. I have them in a folder on my desktop, so they are still there, and I really do want to get to them for this Ask Me Anything podcast. But I'm sorry, this is way too big of a news story. It's way too big of drama. And I thought, really, which maybe shame on me for feeling this way, I thought on this Sunday I wouldn't have to be too worried about Jeffrey Lurie and Doug Pederson. I figured I'd be able to relax, drink a nice fat cup of coffee late afternoon, and watch some Bears Saints and watch that early Ravens-Tennessee game and just dive into all the action and not worry about an abysmal franchise. Well, I should have thought ahead. I should have been prepared. I should have known that this is how they operate. It's nonstop news. And there's something to be said about these stories leaking. Who is not involved in every single one of these story leaks? It's Howie Roseman, okay? It's Howie Roseman. And the way that this works is there's people inside the organization who goes to certain writers and goes to certain analysts and goes to certain reporters and say, hey, make sure this is published. Hey, make sure you put this out there. And Howie Roseman is never, ever mentioned, which raises a red flag, which shows me and tells me, possibly all of these stories that we see continue to drop could be internally Howie Roseman and some of the front office members up top at the NovaCare complex. They want this information out there. They want the people to know, hey, Doug Pederson can still be fired. It's never Howie. Howie hasn't had a bad thing said about him since. And how can you possibly say that he deserves zero blame when this franchise is falling off a damn cliff? Where he has been involved in Chip Kelly, Doug Pederson, and now if he gets fired, another head coach. In what, 8 seasons? That's not how good organizations are ran. You don't just turn over that quickly. Then factor in the debacle of the Carson Wentz contract. Then factor in the debacle of the drafts. It's nonstop. Yet no one has a bad thing to say about the general manager. I think that tells me everything I need to know on who is releasing this information and how it is getting out to the public. That's where we will begin. We are broadcasting live from the Manscaped Man Cave. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BROD at manscaped.com. So the first initial tweet that left everybody all stunned on Twitter was from Chris Mortensen, and it said this: Doug Pederson's status as Eagles head coach is not firm. Sources tell Tim McManus and me. Pederson could be out if owner Jeffrey Lurie is not confident about Pederson's vision going forward after the two meet again soon. Lurie's concerns extend with beyond Carson Wentz, per sources. And we had Sal Pal on the Sports Bash on Friday, right? He said a quote that we tweeted out there from our 97.3 ESPN Twitter page, and people were not happy. The fan base was disgusted, and as soon as it left Sal Pal's mouth, my eyebrows raised. I looked at Mike Gill off the air, and we both knew, oh yeah, that's something that'll get the people going. And it was pretty much this. Sal Pal would be beyond shocked if Press Taylor was not Doug Pederson's offensive coordinator. I would be pissed if that's the case. And I just wonder if Jeffrey Lurie, who didn't allow Doug Pederson to hire his past coaches, if he's saying, okay, Doug, You are allowed. I am willing you to go out and hire who you want. And Doug goes, okay, press Taylor. And now Jeffrey Lurie's like, hold on a second. I don't know if I feel comfortable about that. I don't know if I really want to go down that road. That would essentially be not making any move. That would be staying the same offensively. And how can you possibly think that is the best direction for this football team? So when Sal Pal said that, I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I would be really devastated if they just moved him up a spot. And you got to think he's been here for quite some time. He was here with the Chip Kelly era. So how is he one of those guys that are still hanging on by a thread? And when Doug Pederson lost his play calling, and I'm using air quotes because who really knew if he was calling plays or wasn't calling plays, and Rich Scangarello calling plays here or whatever. I mean, it was a total nightmare, and it was so dysfunctional from that aspect. But apparently during that time, Press Taylor was someone who was calling the plays. And then there was that action shot on the sideline of Carson Wentz and Press Taylor going at it and screaming at one another. And we all have heard the stories about their relationship and how Carson Wentz and him are more buddy-buddy. So to see them get so fired up at one another, it's almost like, okay, was he calling the plays and Carson was not happy with something? And I remember at that time, too, that was in a game where the offense was moving better than we've ever really seen it to that point. So it was kind of like, well, they're moving the football with Carson better than they really have all season long. Something broke down in a play, but that's when you're going to see guys going back and forth with one another on the sideline. It was a very wonky situation. My point is, though, that I feel there is a correlation between what Sal Pal had to say and the reports that Jeffrey Lurie is not happy with the vision Doug Pederson has. If I'm an owner of an organization and I hire someone that is as powerful as a head coach should be, if I feel the need to take away power from that guy, not even allow him to hire his coaches, not allow him to do certain things that a head coach should do, then I don't have the right guy in my eyes. Now, whether that's the right or wrong answer for Doug Pederson specifically, forget who it is. Forget Lurie or Doug Pederson. Let's talk big picture and not so much specific people. I'm talking about the mindset of the business. If I am an owner of a business and I need to hire someone underneath of me, if I feel the need to strip that individual from certain decisions, I no longer have the guy that I am looking for that role. I would then get rid of that person and then bring in someone who I can say, hey, you are underneath of me. I need you to do X, 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 and X. And then I allow that person to do it. So to me, it seems that Jeffrey Lurie doesn't feel confident in the guy. And also, if you're at this point, what more information do you need? Shouldn't you know already? It's just like Jalen Hurts last game of the season. What do you need to see out of Jalen Hurts that would ever move the needle a certain way for you if you're going to hand him the keys or not? What more can you see in that fourth game of his that he would have started that last game against the Washington football team? You already know what you've seen in him, and you already have your general idea on how you feel for him entering next season. You're not going to move that needle and push you one way or the other. You already have your mind set for Jalen Hurts moving into next season. You're intrigued. He doesn't scream franchise quarterback. He has a nice skill set. You could work with that. But you knew where he was. Nothing was going to change. With Doug, what's going to change? You should already know, and you should already have your thoughts on Doug Pederson. The relationship is fractured. Carson Wentz, he didn't even really have the true exit meeting that he would have like a normal offseason. Him, Doug, Lurie, the fact that we are sitting here discussing how they haven't even really communicated yet is everything you really need to know. Now, Rob Maaddi of the Associated Press, who was very involved in Carson Wentz and involved in this story, claimed that Carson Wentz needs some time to think about it. He needs to take some time off, relax, think about if he wants to ask for a trade, think about if he wants to stay here in Philadelphia. That's another issue. See, the best way to describe it is, remember when the MLB was going through all of these issues last season before the COVID-19 season happened? Everyone was saying, oh, these owners are so pathetic. Oh, owners, they are assholes. But they weren't the only issue. The players were a major problem as well. They had so many flaws in their argument. Blake Snell saying, I'm not taking a pay cut, blah, blah, blah. They were just as much of a joke in the debacle. This isn't all just Carson Wentz, but this isn't all just Jeffrey Lurie and Doug Pederson as well. Both sides are at fault, and both sides need to figure this thing out. They need to come together and stop being babies. They need to come together, sit together, communicate together. Communication. It's almost as if that is the biggest problem in this organization. They don't talk. They don't figure out issues together. Everyone has their own thoughts. They keep it to themselves, and they don't come together for a common goal. There was a Dallas Cowboys reporter, I believe he writes for Sports Illustrated, but the Dallas Cowboys version, he's been covering the team for a long-ass time, but I didn't know how much stock to put into it. His name is Mike Fisher, because there wasn't too much context involved, but essentially he was reporting that Howie Roseman is pointing the finger at Doug. Doug is pointing the finger at Howie Roseman. And they just can't figure it out because they're all blaming one another. How about you sit down, communicate, and figure out all of the issues and talk about this? But if they're not going to, and they're going to stay down this path, you're going to have to make some major moves. And I'm at the point where you might have to blow this thing up. That might be the best case scenario for this franchise long term. There was a Jets reporter after this news broke, looking at Doug Pederson's resume saying, this is great. I don't see the hate towards Doug Pederson. I don't see why anyone would not want Doug Pederson as the face of their coaching staff. And he pointed out that in 2017, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. In 2018, they were an Alshon Jeffrey drop away from making the championship game. In 2019, Wentz was knocked out in a playoff game. Here's where I have an issue with that. There's so much context involved that needs to be discussed. In 2018, you can't say that they were an Alshon Jeffrey catch away from the championship game and not say that they were a missed field goal away from even playing in the divisional round, right? They won that wild card game on the road against the Chicago Bears. They got so lucky the field goal kicker quadruple doinked it. So you can't use it to your advantage in one game and not say that they were one bounce away from not even getting a playoff victory that season. So that is very flawed. Now, that season, they made the playoffs at 9-7. They didn't win the division that year. The Dallas Cowboys did with 10 wins. So, okay, I'll say fine. They made the playoffs at 9-7. The following year, Wentz going down, that significantly hurt what you can do with Josh McCown, who was running around with what, like a torn up knee, and the guy barely played at 40 years old. Yes, Doug Pederson, very limited. That 9-7 season, though, was a lot different. The division was trash. The division was garbage. That 9-7 felt different from the 9-7 the year before. But I still give them credit for making it. That was the scenario laid out. Carson had to win those 4 games. He did it with the practice squad receivers. But it's not as if there was a team in the division, you look around some of these other divisions where teams have 13 wins and squads have 12 wins. And then the second team, has 10-6, and that's their wild card team. If that's the case, I think you look at it completely different halfway through the season when you're 5-7 and the team above you already has 10 wins. So the context matters. The 2018 one, that's where I really have the issue. But going to the Super Bowl victory, that's a big item that you can't just take away from Doug. But I'll say this, just because you win a Super Bowl, it doesn't mean you are the greatest coach in the world. We can all look at Mike McCarthy right now and say, well, hold on a second. That guy won a Super Bowl. I wouldn't want him leading my franchise. I wouldn't hire Mike McCarthy. That's a bad hire, in my opinion. Now, the Dallas Cowboys needed a presence that was way better than Jason Garrett's. I understand why he has value to some franchises and to some organizations. I think that there's some organizations out there that need a firm voice, that needs a respected voice, that needs a guy that's been around, that has a lot of experience, that has winning in his resume, like that holds value to certain teams that are dumpster fires, teams that are trying to figure out a new identity. So I'm not claiming the guy has zero value in the league, but I personally would not want to hire Mike McCarthy as the Eagles head coach. That would not be something I am excited about. John Gruden, the guy won a Super Bowl. I think he has value in this league. I think he has personality in this league. I would not be thrilled if John Gruden was the Eagles head coach and was a head coach of a Philadelphia Eagles squad. My point bringing that up is they won Super Bowls. Just because you did doesn't mean that's who you are forever. Now, I'm torn because a side of me believes that he deserves a chance. The other side believes that this guy is a stew-nod. This guy is a joke. This guy is pathetic. And everything that I see shows me that he's not the best coach. You need to be good on game day. He's not good on game day. We spoke to Adam Kaplan of Inside the Birds. All he brings up is this play design. The play design is awful. The play design is horrendous. The play design needs help. And you brought in all these guys, right, to help out with pre-snap movement. You bring in guys, Rich Scangarello, Marty Mortimer, all these guys who have experience around the league so they can implement things that they used in other places. Kyle Shanahan's tree, right? All right, hey, 49ers, you're used to work there. And then somehow everything that you wanted to use, it was never implemented in the game plan. Well, why is that? Is that Doug saying, I'm not working with these guys. I don't trust any of their information. Who's making that decision? How come all of the tendencies from these coaches that you brought them in for was never truly implemented into the scheme? Who does that fall on? Is that Doug being stubborn? It's wild. All right, so more on the initial report. So this was in the ESPN article that Tim McManus put out. Pederson and Lurie are expected to meet again early this week in Florida after discussions this past Tuesday did not go well, according to sources. But Lurie, to this point, has not been sold on how Pederson's plans to fix the He's not sold on Pederson's plans to fix the offense and get the Eagles back to contender status, according to sources. Wentz has not spoken publicly since the Eagles season ended, and a player source indicated that the quarterback did not have the normal end-of-season interview with Pederson or the staff. While Pederson's fragile status does not necessarily focus around Wentz's issues, according to sources, his description when pressed about the team's offensive identity during one internal meeting with management was, quote, troubling. His plan to address his coaching staff also lacked urgency, the sources said. Doesn't look good for Doug. I just wonder, how do you go back to Doug at this point? And what type of message does this send to the locker room? This guy is clearly hanging on by a thread. This guy is on thin ice. You're telling me the locker room is going to respect this guy the same way? Don't give me what happened at the end of the season snowballing into next season. I'm not even talking about that. I think that happened, and I think guys are pissed off with Doug. You saw Jalen Hurts mouth what he mouthed on the sideline, that's not right. I think that plays a role in how some guys will view him moving forward, even though Jason Kelce put out a report. I think a lot of that had to do with him saying, I'm sticking up for my guy Nate Sudfeld because Nate Sudfeld was getting abused. So Jason Kelce put out, hey, I went up to Doug Pederson. I was asking if we were going to Sudfeld. I was a little surprised. I think he realized how much Sudfeld was getting ripped apart, that he wanted to make sure that someone stood up for the third-string quarterback in Sudfeld. So with all that nonsense that happened late, and keep in mind, did the front office tell him to lose? Did the front office tell him to be that pathetic so they get that 6th pick? Andrew Brandt was stating in his podcast that if you look at what it would take. If you had the 9th and you wanted to move up to the 6th, it would cost you a second-round pick. So essentially, the Eagles saved themselves a second-round pick by losing that game. Now, that doesn't mean that they would have traded up from 9 to 6, but if they did want to, if they were going to go after a corner, or if they were going to go after a wide receiver that wouldn't be available at 9, that saved them a second-round draft pick to have to move up and get that said player. So that is very big. But what does this say from a locker room standpoint? You feel differently about your coach if you know he's safe, if you know he is respected, if you know everyone's on the same page, compared to a free-for-all. Compared to, dude, what is Doug Pederson doing? You know that he's on the hot seat. You know if he makes mistakes. And how does this impact Doug coaching? Is he now feeling the pressure so much that, he coaches a different way, or, he thinks differently and approaches differently for the better or for the worse? Maybe he rises to the occasion, and because he knows he needs to prove to everybody I'm not some bad coach, that he elevates his coaching, or it can go the other way where he gets out of his comfort zone and things get sloppy and mushy and ugly because, he decided to bring in Press Taylor. It blows my mind that he sits there and truly looks at his coaching staff and goes, you know what would help me the most? Press Taylor. What has he ever done? He's been here forever. There's no way that his impact is so big, and that makes you feel comfortable. What I think it does is it makes you feel comfortable that you keep calling the plays. You don't want to give up play calling. Bringing in maybe a Jim Caldwell or a more respected guy would allow the front office and the ownership group to maybe look the other way and say, you're no longer going to be calling plays. It keeps you safe from calling the plays. Possibly. More than it would if someone else was in. Let's say that. This is the same guy that wanted to keep Mike Groh. At what point are we going to stop turning over OCs and all of this help and start looking at the guy with the play sheet in his hands? I think that is an interesting question. All right, I want to let you guys know about my friends at DraftKings. While the holiday season may be over, the sports calendar is in full swing this week. From collegiate to professional sports, there's no shortage of action. There's no better place to get in on all the action than with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. To celebrate this year's football playoffs, DraftKings is giving all new players the chance to bet on any of this weekend's professional football games at 100-1 odds. That's right, all you have to do is bet $1 on any football game this weekend, and if your team wins, you cash $100. While we're all excited about football, let's not forget about the 2021 basketball season that tipped off. So head to the app now and check out all of DraftKings' daily odds boost. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code BRODES when you sign up to get 100-1 odds on any football game this weekend. That's code BRODES for new players to get a shot at $100 on any football action this weekend. For a limited time, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. Pennsylvania only. Restrictions apply. In partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Here's some other things I want to point out when it comes to this front office and who they hired in the past. Or not even who they hired, but let's look at who they interviewed. You got to remember, before Doug Pederson was the guy, they looked at Adam Gase. They looked at Ben McAdoo. And they hired Chip Kelly before that. So are we trusting these people involved to pick the right person to be in charge in getting it right moving forward? You can make the argument that Andy Reid was something they lucked into. And that's awesome. And I would be stoked if they lucked into another superstar head coach. But the chances of that happening is not very high. While other teams are already interviewing coaches, if you decide to make this decision now, you're already behind. You have the Jets, Falcons, Lions, Texans, Jags, Chargers, all beginning their process. Well, there's guys already one step ahead of you. And how intriguing is this job? I will say, as bad as it is internally, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles speak highly for itself. Just the fact that logo, that name, the city, East Coast, the history. The Philadelphia Eagles is more attractive than the Detroit Lions, more attractive than the Chargers, the Falcons, the Jags, right? It's the Philadelphia Eagles. So just the logo and name itself will definitely have someone's eyeballs raised and their eyebrows raised because it is a location that cares about football. They're diehard about football. People would like to be the face of the coaching staff. There's no doubt about it. But Doug Pederson won a Super Bowl, and look how he's being treated. Look at this mess. Does someone want to come here and really be involved with Howie and Jeffrey Lurie after seeing the relationship problem that they just recently had and seeing how the Chip Kelly stuff happened? That was the last regime. Here comes the owner, just get rid of his ass. Now, everybody probably would have in that scenario. It's not like Jeffrey Lurie's the only one that would have stepped in. But Jeffrey Lurie giving the keys to Chip Kelly was the downfall of this organization. Even though he admitted he made a mistake, it's almost as if he's afraid to do it again. It's almost as if he doesn't want to hand those keys to anybody else, even Doug Pederson, because he made that mistake in the past. It was miserable, and now he's keeping his cards close to his chest. He doesn't want his baby in somebody else's hands to have someone possibly screw that up, but you're going to have to take that risk at some point, or you are going to continue to have this filthy, filthy platter. You know, it's just not even close to being an intriguing spot right now from anything other than the logo, for anything other than the name, the fan base, and how much we care about the Philadelphia Eagles. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that is enough. But I find it hard to believe that someone's going to go, I want to work for Lurie and Howie Roseman after they just ran a Super Bowl head coach out of town in 3 years, after they're not willing to change the GM and they can't draft players right, if they can't knock their draft picks, because guys want to have power. Guys want to come in there and say, I want some personnel priorities. I want to have my say in this. I want to help pick the guys. I want to help draft the players. I want to help build my roster. That's part of being a head coach. And if you're unwilling to give that to the people, well, you're not going to have people come in and say, yeah, you know what? This sounds great. There's one thing, though, that really stands out to me if a head coach is going to step into this filth. Would you be able to get credit for fixing Carson Wentz? Because I think if they move on from Doug, that's essentially saying, all right, let's start fresh with the quarterback. Their relationship is fractured. They're not really connecting well. They don't bounce off one another. Let's get someone in here who does. All right, well, will that individual get the recognition of fixing Carson Wentz if that is what ends up happening? Initially, I thought Doug was safe, and I was going to ask that question about the new offensive coordinator. Because if they hire an OC, and Doug is still the one play calling, how excited are people to jump at the Eagles' OC job? You don't really get an opportunity to call plays. It's not like you would get the chance that you do at the defensive coordinator spot. With Jim Schwartz leaving, if they hire Matt Burke or they just move him up in the pecking order, if they go out and get somebody else, a veteran guy who's been around the league who maybe failed at the head coaching spot but can be a good DC, similar to Jim Schwartz, they are the face of the defense. They have say in a lot of things. They have a lot of power on that side of the field. And OC, you don't if Doug Pederson's still here. So the one thing that I thought would maybe bring the attention to that would be you can be the face of fixing Carson Wentz. Well, same could be said if Doug Pederson's ran out of town and you hire a new head coach. So that's the only thing I'm holding on to from a how intriguing is this job standpoint. And here's another thing. If you close your eyes and I tell you Doug Pederson's resume without much context, it's not that bad. All right? As much as the guy to me is an idiot, his resume is not that bad. What type of resume will make you comfortable? If I said, here's Coach A and here's Coach B. Coach A won a Super Bowl, made the playoffs 3 straight times, won games with backup quarterbacks, had big rallies late in the season, played the hottest football in December. You'd probably be like, wow, I wouldn't mind that guy. Well, that guy's Doug Pederson. Now, that's why I always say that you need context. You can't have these conversations without context. But I'm just saying, if you blindly hear a resume, you might be looking like, how much better are you going to get, is my point, than Doug Pederson's resume. But I think it's past the point of Doug Pederson being here. I really do. I don't think Doug Pederson's resume even matters at this point because it's so dysfunctional internally and everyone's pointing fingers and everyone's on the wrong page where, it's like they're trying and they're really forcing to come together and it's just not the case. I hate to compare it to this, but it's a reality and it's how some relationships go. It's like a couple who knows that they're headed towards divorce, but they're unwilling to say it's time. It's time to get lawyers involved. It's time to go to court. It's time to get a divorce. It's time to move on. It's like they lived together for a couple months saying, hey, we can do this. Let's try. Let's try and keep it together. Let's try and keep this family together. And they know deep down it's not a reality. We don't connect the same way anymore. We did have that love at one point, but we no longer have that love and intense fire for one another. And that's okay. So let's get the divorce and let's move on. Right now, they're that couple that will eventually get divorced that's trying to keep the family together just because they don't want to do it. They don't want to move away from one another. But the best bet is they have to do it. The best bet is to start fresh. The husband, he needs to find a new person. The wife, she needs to find a new man. And the Eagles need to find a new head coach. And Doug Pederson needs to find a new team. And he will. There's no doubt about it. There would be a team willing to take a shot on Doug P. He would get hired, snap of the finger. He'd be just as hot as a candidate as Eric Bieniemy is. No doubt about it. And if I was running another franchise, guess what? He'd be one of the first guys I call. Right here, right now, the relationship is just not stable enough. He can have a great relationship in another area. I don't think Doug Pederson is going to be an epic fail wherever he goes next because he will go in another spot. No doubt. No doubt. It just wasn't working here. And you put yourself in this situation. And it's not just as simple as drafting Jalen Hurts. There's so many issues that all snowballed into one. Just like I said, you don't go from where Carson Wentz was to where he is now with just one problem, with just one issue, with just Carson Wentz falling off of a cliff with play. There's 10 million things that happen for it to eventually fall to where you are now. And it's very unfortunate. I don't know how they stay together. I think it's so fragile at this point. It's such a mess. It's so bad. How can you possibly pick up the pieces and put glue on it to connect it to all form together once again? Everyone is lost. Everyone is on different pages. Everyone sees it differently. Everyone's finger pointing. And the one guy that really needs to go that won't is Howie Roseman. I think they need a new GM in there. And Jeffrey Lurie is unwilling to cut ties with that one man. And that could be the difference in starting fresh. And that could be the difference in really hitting that refresh button and really restarting. And until that man goes, you're gonna be stuck with this. That's how it's gonna go. So with over 20 years of experience in the solar industry, Orbit Energy and Power is home to your solar experts in both residential and commercial projects. They are dedicated to making sure your project is completed easily and properly by using high-quality materials and trained professionals to get the job done right. Their solar program helps eliminate your electric bill completely. They offer flexible financing solutions such as $0 down. In addition, they will make sure that you receive all the state and federal incentives available for switching to solar. They provide water purification systems, backup energy services, battery storage, and more. New roofs, electrical upgrades, you name it, they provide it for your home. Check out all of their information. It is down below in the description. So, yeah, I pretty much just looked at all the pieces involved in this story, but the most troubling problem, it goes deeper than just Doug Pederson, even though he is a very hot topic and deserves to get criticized and deserves to get ripped apart for everything that has taken place from an offensive standpoint, because injuries played a role and he didn't have the offensive line, but that doesn't take away you giving Miles Sanders 6 carries in a football game. It doesn't take away dropping back Carson Wentz 40-plus times with banged-up wide receivers, bad wide receivers, and awful play from those guys and telling your quarterback, hey, keep throwing the ball. Hey, keep doing big big dropbacks and trying to throw us back into the football game. No, you're putting your team in positions to fail. That's on you even through all of the injuries and through the bad personnel issues. But there are bad personnel problems, and that goes back to Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman, he has to go. He has to go from player evaluation standpoint. I've been firm on this take. This team is in cap hell. He's the reason why you're in cap hell. Duly noted. He's still one of your best options to get out of it. So it's not necessarily can his ass, get him out of town, run him out of the city, but it's you got to get a new face. Have Howie Roseman be the manager of the money guy, but don't make him the face of the GM. Make him a new name, give him a new title, and then get someone in here to do the GM, face of the GM move so you can somewhat, once again, hit that reset button, that big panic button that's big red, and you hit it, all the sirens go off. That needs to be hit. And it starts with Howie. And it really starts with Lurie. The problem is he's not going anywhere, and he's the one that needs to make those decisions, and he's not going to. But you can't get rid of Lurie. So Lurie needs to get rid of Howie in his current spot, shift him aside, let him work on the money, get a new GM face. Won't happen. So it's going to be the head coach, possibly. And I think it needs to be. At this point, I think Doug deserves one more year, but I think the relationship is so cracked that at that point it's irrelevant. At this point, it's all irrelevant. It's so cracked, the relationship can't be fixed. So that's why it's time for Doug to go in my eyes, and it looks like Lurie's going about it. It just seems to not be the best way to go about it, and we shouldn't be surprised that it's being handled this way. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you next time.